Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mangg, and this is not the podcast you're looking for. Nah, it probably is. Never mind. So welcome back to the Manggcast. Today is September 19th, 2015. And we have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about today, so we're going to dive right into it. It was the Tokyo Game Show this week, although I don't have a great deal of info. I mean, most of it's kind of just like... I want to use the term anime bullshit, but I'm not going to... No, I won't use that term. But most of it is stuff that I'm not really interested in. But first thing is a couple of pieces of news from Nintendo. And before I bash on them, no, I'm not going to bash on them. Well, a little bit, maybe. I usually do. But it was the 30th anniversary this week of the original release of Super Mario Brothers on the Famicom. 30 years ago on September 13th. So that is crazy. We've come a long way from that. Or have we? Yeah, a little bit. All right, so the big piece of news out of Nintendo this week was that they announced their new president. And it's not Miyamoto, it's not anybody else you probably may have wanted or suspected. It is Tatsumi Kimishima. He was the president of Nintendo of America from 2002 to 2006, and then he was succeeded by Reggie Fils-Aimé. Before that, apparently he had worked at a bank, and probably some sort of managerial, I don't know, some sort of position for nearly 3 decades. And he was also the chief financial officer of the Pokemon Company, and later the president of that company's U.S. Section. So he's been around. He's very much a businessman. Quite a bit different than, say, Miyamoto, who's very much a gamer, or Iwata, even, who was very much a gamer. So they're going for more of a business approach now. The question is, why? Well, I don't think it's a very complicated answer. I think that they are... I don't know if they're sweating it. I don't know if they're sweating their position right now. They've had better times, I think. So they maybe want to... I mean, I want to say they want to do less experimentation and more just, let's put out what works, what people want, and just make money. And, you know, with a businessman, he's going to look at the numbers. He's not going to be thinking about innovation or experimentation, or maybe, that's still going to be a part of it, but I think people could be potentially scared by this announcement, diehard Nintendo fans that love the innovation stuff, and they're worried that, oh yeah, we're just going to make mobile games, and we're going to make a lot of money off of them. I mean, that's definitely a possibility. The NX, its future is, it's gonna happen. It's certainly well on its development, so I doubt that, anything is really gonna change that much. Potentially, maybe now it will not be announced next E3, but I would imagine that's still probably on track. I think they're well on their way. So yeah, we'll see where he takes the company, what happens, but it's definitely I think he's a businessman first. And I think they picked that for a reason, so we'll see where it goes. So, the first big announcement then after his presidency, his new presidency, was that Star Fox Zero for the Wii U has been delayed. It was actually Miyamoto that put out the statement, which makes sense, but it's an interesting coincidence, I guess. So yeah, Star Fox Zero, he says, has been delayed, and it is going to be released Q1 2016, and it was originally planned to be out this year by the holidays. So he says that it's been delayed because they need a little more time to work on areas such as the unprecedented discovery that we want players to experience in the game by using 2 screens, and further polishing the level designs and perfecting the tone of the cutscenes. While we have already reached the stage where it would be technically possible to release the title in time for the year-end holiday season, we want to polish the game a bit more. So, I think whenever there's any sort of announcements like this, especially about delays, you know, you always got to wonder, it's like, is what we're reading here the actual truth of the situation, or is this just what we're meant to believe? It's very possible that this is the truth, that, you know, it could be released, but they don't feel comfortable releasing it. They actually want to polish it up a little bit, whatever that means, and so they're going to delay it. Or is it for some other mysterious reason that they don't actually want to tell us? I don't know what that reason would be, but keeping in mind that between now and next E3, Nintendo doesn't have a whole lot planned for the Wii U. They just came out with Mario Maker, which is, I think it's doing all right, as well as a Wii U title could do it in this climate. So I think it's doing okay. People are really enjoying it. Then you have Star Fox, which was supposed to come out, you know, this year, this holiday, but now it's being pushed back. Past that, we have Yoshi's Woolly World. Okay. Xenoblade Chronicles X, I guess. I mean, from Nintendo, there's not a whole lot. They're not. I mean, they're focused on the NX and the 3DS pretty much. So yeah, there's not a whole lot coming from Nintendo. So maybe they want to space it out, I guess, until the NX. Because I think we can all pretty much be sure that Zelda is going to be a launch title for the NX. At this point, I think that would be the safest bet and the smartest move on their part. So it's kind of like, they're like, you know, it's like 2 o'clock on a Friday at work, and you're just like killing time until you can go home. That's kind of what Nintendo is doing until the NX comes out. And they're just like, well, got this Star Fox, I don't know, just push it to February, and then maybe that'll buy us some more time. You know, I don't know. That could be it, or it could be that they need to polish it. Who's to say? I don't really have any interest in this game. I have no plan of getting it. I have no interest in playing a game on 2 screens. As much as I love to multitask and I have 2 monitors and all that, playing a game on 2 screens, just like looking back and forth, that sounds kind of nauseating. Maybe they can do it well, but I don't know. You know, it's Nintendo. So, yeah. My hope is in the NX at this point. I mean, yeah. Alright, moving on. Kingdom Hearts. So Kingdom Hearts is a series that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It involves Squaresoft working with Disney, and they combine kind of an action RPG with all sorts of Disney characters and Square characters. And so you got Mickey Mouse, and he's got a Keyblade, and he works with... There aren't actually that many Square characters, I guess. I haven't played in a while. It's a lot of Disney stuff, but with Square kind of making it. Anyways. So they had Kingdom Hearts, which came out, gosh, that was a while ago. I played that shit a while. I was so excited when that game came out because I was a big Squaresoft fan, Square Enix, and Disney. It's like, all right, sure, Disney, yeah, why not? Came out in 2002. Jeez, it's been that long? Oh my gosh. For the PS2. And I think I had like the strategy guide for that game. I loved it. And then Kingdom Hearts 2 came out in 2005, and I thought that was all right. I think I did prefer the first one just because I was 12 when that game came out. So yeah, I mean, it was kind of yes. Then they came out with all sorts of other weird shit. Mostly mobile stuff. They came out with like phone games and Game Boy Advance games, PSP games, 3DS, like, and they all had weird names like 358, 2 Days, and Dream Drop Distance, and all sorts of stuff. The only other thing that's come out for consoles has been basically remixes, like HD re-releases. Like the HD 1.5 remix and the HD 2.5 remix. And they are working on Kingdom Hearts 3, although we don't know when we'll ever see that, although I'm fairly sure we will. But today, they announced Kingdom Hearts HD 2.8. Yeah, that's what it's called. It's called Kingdom Hearts HD 2.8. And it will contain an HD remaster of 3DS title Kingdom Hearts 3D Dream Drop Distance. It will also have a completely new HD theater cinematic called Kingdom Hearts X back cover, and a short new Kingdom Hearts playable episode called Kingdom Hearts 0.2 Birth by Sleep, a fragmentary passage. Jesus Christ. How does that... What? How do these numbers make sense? Okay, so you have the HD 2.5 remix. Okay, so it's a... What is Dream Drop Distance? That's just its own game. How does that work into... Okay, well maybe... Okay, so Kingdom Hearts 3D Dream Drop Distance. You have 3 there, and then they're including this Kingdom Hearts 0.2. So you take 3 minus 0.2, and you get 2.8, I guess. I think that may be their logic. Although, why is it reduced? Like, why is it a reduction? That doesn't make any sense. I have no idea. And what is Kingdom Hearts X back cover? Apparently that was... But what is it? I don't know. Japanese people, man. I don't know. How hard is it to just call it Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance HD? That's what it is. I mean, yeah, you got some other stuff in there, but okay, I don't think people are buying it for the other stuff. Maybe they are. I have no idea. This all just blows my mind, and I had to mention it because it just doesn't make any sense. What else doesn't make sense is that Capcom is now putting out, and they announced a Resident Evil Umbrella Corps, which is a first-person shooter slated for the PS4 early next year in Japan. No word yet on a Western release. So, let me tell you what Japanese people like. Japanese people like Resident Evil. Or Biohazard, whatever. Let me tell you what Japanese people don't like. First-person shooters. I'm kind of watching the trailer footage here. I mean, it's all kind of stylized. So, it seems kind of like third-person, and you can go into first-person. So it's not strictly like, you know, Call of Duty or something like that. And I guess how it works is like it's team-based, class-based, I guess, and it's a multiplayer shooter, so, you know, it's team versus team. And you're in these locations that are filled with zombies. But the zombies are not interested in you because you have a zombie jammer on your back, all right? And so, if your zombie jammer gets, like, damaged because somebody hits it, then zombies are suddenly, you know, gonna try to kill you. So, here's a better suggestion. Why not just kill the person instead of just, I'm gonna try to hit their jammer? Like, I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe you get more points if a zombie kills them because of you. I don't know. I have no idea. This sounds pretty retarded. But this is what the Resident Evil series is at right now. This is what they're doing. They're putting out a multiplayer online shooter. Yes. And we still have no word, as far as I remember, we have no word of a Resident Evil 7. And as always, I think it always comes down to money. That's always what it is. And so, I mean, I don't even know if I bought Resident Evil 6. I think I played the demo and I was like, I'm good. But Resident Evil 6 did not receive great reactions from critics. Unfortunately, unlike movies, we can't really just check sales numbers or anything. I wish they would fix this. Capcom announced that it shipped 4.5 million copies worldwide, but that's shipped. That is not sold. It says here, I'm using Wiki. I'm using Wikipedia. It says in October 2012, the game sold 806,000 copies. And the publisher admitting that the game would not meet their goals, lowering financial projections for their fiscal year as a result. But then, apparently, it says it sold 5.2 million copies worldwide, becoming one of Capcom's best-selling video games. If that is true, where is Resident Evil 7? It's not like, oh, I guess we're just gonna stop the series here because, you know, we can't come up with any new... No, you can come up with new stuff. Something's not right here. It doesn't make sense that maybe they are working on it. I mean, I can't say I don't live in Japan. I don't sneak into Capcom's facilities to find out this stuff. So I don't know. I'm just sitting here. Maybe we'll get an announcement. It wasn't a Tokyo Game Show. What they announced, you know, this week was Resident Evil or Biohazard Umbrella Corps. So maybe E3, but who's to say? Who's to say, really? But yeah, that doesn't sound something that fascinates me, but maybe... It's only coming to Japan. They didn't say anything about a Western release. I don't know. I can't see this doing well, but what do I know? What I do know is that I like Bloodborne. I think that is something good out of Japan. And they announced this week, Sony announced the first Bloodborne DLC. Or they're actually referring to it as an expansion, apparently. And that makes sense because they're pricing it at $20. It's called The Old Hunters, and it will be out November 24th. And I will read the official description. Set in a nightmare world where hunters from the past are trapped forever, explore brand new stages full of dangers, rewards, and deadly beasts to overcome. You'll find multiple new outfits and weapons to add to your arsenal, as well as additional magic to wield and add more variety to your combat strategy. With new story details, learn the tale of hunters who once made Yharnam their hunting grounds, meet new NPCs, and discover another side of the history and world of Bloodborne. Here's a brief glimpse of just some of what lies in store for you when The Old Hunters launches on November 24th, including Simon's bowblade weapon and new boss enemy Ludwig. And there is a trailer that you can watch if you want. It's about 2 minutes long. And, okay, so... Yeah, so Ludwig is apparently the main boss, I guess, of the expansion, the DLC. And if you recall, if you know anything about Bloodborne, played or watched any of it, you know that Ludwig, when you play the game, is long dead, I believe. I'm fairly certain. Maybe... I mean, I guess I gotta check, but I'm fairly certain he's dead because you get access to his weapon, his holy blade. And it's... Yeah, he was the first hunter of the church. I thought... Oh man, I'm trying to remember my Bloodborne lore. I have like the huge guidebook here next to me, but it's under a stack of shit, so I don't know if I want to look. But yeah, it's the Old Hunter, so I'm kind of maybe wondering if it's going to be like a prequel or something like that, but time is kind of always weird in these games, so maybe you'll just go back in time or blah, blah, blah. because it's not like it's not like a standalone thing. Like, you don't just, you play your whatever character you want, and you just access this content, and you can carry these weapons over to the normal game and blah blah blah. So yeah, the trailer doesn't show a great deal of new stuff, surprisingly, as in new locations. And I understand they like to keep a tight lid on that, because you don't really want to be spoiled by all the new stuff that you're going to be seeing. Like, they want to keep that, fresh and exciting for people to get it. And I don't blame them for that. I appreciate that they keep that hidden. What they mostly show is kind of the new weapons that you'll be seeing, some new enemies you might encounter, brief glimpses of bosses. And the one new weapon that I'm really excited about is like, well, there's actually two. The bow blade, I guess, you get a brief glimpse of, and yeah, it's a bow. I guess part of it is a bow, which is very cool. That was sorely missing from Bloodborne. I mean, yeah, it's got guns, but they're not very OP. Not like a bow could be. But then the other one is like, it's something out of like battle bots or something like that. It's got like a spinning blades on the end of it. It looks odd. You charge it up and it's great. It's great. My only concern, I guess, is that it's not going to be potentially justifiable at $20. It depends on how much content there is, and it's just difficult to say because they don't want to show it off. So it's just kind of something that you either have to wait and see what other people say, or you just have to kind of trust them. I, of course, will be trusting them. I'll be getting it on, release day, and I'll be let's playing it. It'll be great. So yeah, $20, November 24th, The Old Hunters. Also, this week they announced the somewhat closer of a release date for Dark Souls 3. Originally, it was just Q1 2016, but now they narrowed it down to April. Not a specific day in April, and they didn't exactly announce if the PC version will be along with that. It's hard to say, but yeah, April, which is in contrast to the normal March releases that they've been going with. So I think because of the kind of tight release schedule they've had for the Soulsborne games in recent years, I think they perhaps needed extra time. So April, which is good because that's right around my birthday, and that's what's better than a new Souls game for my birthday. So there you go. That is what I have to say about this week in video game news. There was a lot more stuff. Like, there was things about, like, I don't know, Persona and, I don't know, other kind of Japanese series. There was stuff about Final Fantasy 15, but I just don't really care to say anything about it. I'm just not really looking into Final Fantasy 15. I'll get it probably when it comes out because it is a Final Fantasy game, and I gotta try it, I guess, but I'm not really interested in reading anything about it or talking about it. So let's move on to movie stuff. And first thing is, well, comic books. Gambit, specifically. So, we've mentioned the Gambit movie a few times in Manggcast. It's kind of like, oh, it's, Channing Tatum's on board, he's really excited. Oh, it's not happening, Channing Tatum's out, there's money issues. And then, oh, it's all back together, it's great. And then now we find out, oh, the director has left the project. So the director at the time was Rupert Wyatt. And he has stated that he now has to leave the project because, regrettably, a push in the start date now conflicts with another project. I thank them for the opportunity. I know that Gambit will make a terrific film. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, is this the truth or is this just a convenient excuse? It's hard to say. It could be for numerous reasons. But I think, in the grand scheme of things, losing a director before the project starts is not, like, that terrible of an issue. Like, if Channing Tatum was like, you know what, I'm out. Peace out. I'm done with this. I think that would put the movie on a pretty big hold. But a director, it's like, just find a guy. Like, unless you're one of, like, you're Christopher Nolan or Steven Spielberg or Peter Jackson or Guillermo del Toro. I think you can just find somebody else to do a comic book movie. That could be harsh of me. Yeah, but so I don't think this will... The movie is not going to be canceled because of this. I think it's still on. Whether or not it makes its intended release date of October 7th of next year, yeah, it's hard to say. I could easily get foresee an announcement that it's being delayed, but... Man, oh man, the poor Gambit movie. Will we ever see it? I mean, I hope so. I like Channing Tatum. Alright, Fantastic Four. Another comic book movie that, we wish we never saw. And yet we did. And we thought that was the end of it. It was a huge flop. It was one of the biggest flops of the year. Nobody liked it. Not even I really liked it. And yet... they're talking about a sequel still. So the writer-producer Simon Kinberg said, "We're figuring out what that movie would be. I'd like that to happen in regards to a sequel. I do believe there is a great Fantastic Four movie that we've made with that cast, so I'm going to figure out what that is." Yeah, so, yeah, So, I mean, the budget, the production budget, by the way, not the marketing budget, which I'm sure was substantial by itself. The production budget was $120 million. And it made $160 million. As I've said many times, it always comes down to money. And yet, this kind of baffles me, and I don't really understand, because this movie was not profitable at all. And yet, here we are. Now, some of you might say, what are you talking about, Mangg? It was definitely profitable. $160 million compared to $120 million. Done. Profitable. Yeah, I think there's a lot of misconception about that. I think people don't really understand how, this is ignoring marketing budgets, which, according to this, it says the marketing budget was about, it bumped up the cost to about $200 million. So, okay, just look at that then, $200 million compared to $160 million. That's a flop. I mean, this has been explained to me in the past. I can't prove that this is 100% accurate. But this is what I've been told, and I believe it. So you can believe it yourself if you wish. How it works, apparently, is that for every dollar that a movie makes domestically, 50 cents of that is profit back to the original company. And the other 50 cents goes to theaters or to, distribution method, all sorts of other things, just overhead costs, blah, blah, blah. 50 cents of it goes back, and that is counted as profit. So if a movie makes $50 million domestically, only about 25 of that is profit for the original, production company. Foreign costs a lot more, I guess, and there's a lot, less profit margin. So for every dollar that a company makes in the worldwide market, 25 cents of that comes back as profit. Now again, I can't prove that this is actually true, but this is how it's been explained to me. This is what I believe, because it sounds correct. Because this explains a lot why you look at some movies like, oh, look at this, it's been profitable, why didn't they get a sequel? What's going on? It's like, no, this was not profitable. Now, this is to go along with the idea that in Hollywood, no movie is ever profitable. Which is another thing that shocks a lot of people to hear, like, Lord of the Rings, or Harry Potter, or Star Wars, or, these series. There's these blockbuster movies, these huge series, and you find out, technically none of these movies ever turned a profit, and that's due to Hollywood accounting, which you can read up on your own. It's dastardly bullshit, but that's just kind of how it is. But no, strictly numerically, this is how I understand it to work. So 50 cents on the dollar for domestic, 25 cents on the dollar for foreign. So you look at that, you say, oh, well, you know, Fantastic Four made $160 million worldwide. Well, okay, if you break that down based on what I understand it to be, it made $55 million domestically, which is about, you know, $27 million profit. And then $100 million foreign, you know, worldwide, and that breaks down to like $26 million. So, okay, you have like a $52 million profit or something for the company, and they put $200 million into a total. It's like, yeah, not so much. This is why horror movies will never stop. Because, you know, they can put $5 million, you know, maybe another $10 million or something like that marketing, and then it rakes in $100 million. And, you know, even with the margins, it works out a lot in their favor. And this is how you get, you know, 9 Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So, anyway, yeah. So, like, you know, this movie made them, like, $50 million profit on a $200 million total budget. And yet they're talking about a sequel, and I just don't understand. I don't understand why they have not just sold the rights back to Marvel immediately. And be thankful for whatever Marvel pays them for it. Like, I just don't get it. Like, this just seems not how to not run a company. But I don't know. I just don't get it. So, we're not going to talk about it. We're going to talk about Cloverfield. Cloverfield came out in 2008. Or 2007? Let me double check. I need to be sure. I need to be totally accurate in everything I say. 2008, yes. And Cloverfield was not incredibly well received. I'm looking up specific. Okay. Well, critically wise, 77% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty good considering it was like a found footage monster movie. 77 is pretty decent, but I don't remember it doing very well with people that I talk to. It gets kind of a lot of hate. I loved it. I mean, I love Cloverfield. I was so pumped about that, and I remember reading all sorts of stuff about it before it came out because people were just discussing this feverishly, and like, that was back in the day when some people thought that it was actually secretly a Chrono Trigger movie, and it was actually Lavos attacking, and that was utterly ridiculous, but I was like, yes, please do it. Yeah, people were pretty insane, but I was insane with them. Anyways, so Cloverfield cost about $25 million, production budget. Box office, $170 million. So even if you break it down to what I've just discussed with you, I think it still works out that it was profitable for them. And yet we've never had a sequel. And so that's kind of what this article is about. Cloverfield was written by Drew Goddard. If you don't know who Drew Goddard is, you really should. Because he's probably one of my favorite writers in Hollywood. He wrote Cloverfield. He wrote and directed Cabin in the Woods, which is easily one of the greatest horror movies of the last 15 years. He wrote World War Z, which I thought was surprisingly good, even though I never read the book. And he's writing The Martian. He also wrote the first 2 episodes of the recent Daredevil series. So yeah, he's proven himself in my eyes. I'm very, very much looking forward to The Martian. So he wrote Cloverfield way back when. And he said, when asked about a sequel, it's more, do we have an idea that we're passionate about? Because not everything needs to be a franchise. The first one had it never felt like we were making a movie. It felt like we were in our garage getting away with one. And I think we want to get back to that. And if we don't, then we're just not going to. Yeah, so not everything needs to be a franchise. That is very much what the writer or the director or an actor might say. That is not what a producer would say. a producer would be like, well, if it's well received and it performs well, then yeah, we'll definitely think about a sequel. The talent is like, well, it doesn't really matter because it has to work. So yeah, there's been a lot of talk of Cloverfield sequel over the years because it was a great movie in my opinion, and there is a lot of room for that because I know I talk a lot about how movies that are basically about a mystery, where the movie works because of the less that you know as a viewer, something like Cube or something like Saw or something like Cloverfield, where you're just following these people in the middle of this monster attack, and you get to know very little from throughout the movie. And so I've said that if they make prequels or sequels that try to explain, work apart the mystery and give you answers, those tend to not work as well. I tend to think that would be the case if they did that with Cloverfield, if they explain, here's where the monster came from, and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just like what he's talked about, what the director talked about way back when, like when the movie came out, was that he would want to make, if he did make a sequel, it would be from basically the exact same movie, but from some other group's perspective, which I think is really interesting, personally, because you have a lot of room for crossover and touching back on the original movie, but you also open it up for more, situations. But I like the idea, but there's a reason, I guess, that has never been made, and I don't know exactly what that reason is. I don't know if it comes down to just the director and the writer just not loving the idea or just not wanting to do it. Because you'd think, at the end of the day, if the studio wants a sequel to be made, they're gonna make a sequel. But the production company for Cloverfield was Bad Robot, which is owned by J.J. Abrams, and so maybe he kind of, he did produce Cloverfield, so I mean J.J. Abrams is not, I guess he is part of the whole Hollywood machine, so he understands profits just like anybody else, but maybe he also is a creator himself. Maybe he understands that, it's just not meant to be, or if it is, then, make it happen. I have no idea. I'm just kind of spitballing. I would like to see a Cloverfield 2, but I understand if it never gets made. Speaking of Drew Goddard, though, and sequels, he also was asked about Cabin in the Woods 2. So Drew Goddard directed Cabin in the Woods, and he co-wrote it with Joss Whedon, who is also, another great writer that's very popular nowadays. And so this is what he had to say about Cabin in the Woods 2. They want to make one. I think Joss, we talked about it. I think we just don't want to fuck it up. I think I've always felt this way. Not everything needs to be a franchise. We only want to make it if we're excited about it. I don't care. I don't think we need to do it. It's more about, is there something that excites us? That universe is pretty exciting, so we talk about it from time to time. I don't know. If I had to put odds, the tricky part with Joss and I especially is it all depends on how we wake up in the morning. If we wake up, I can easily see us over drinks tomorrow going like, hey, what if we did this? But I can also see us being like, the movie's pretty good, we don't need to revisit it. Again, see, these are content, these are creators talking about it. They just think about it from, the creation perspective. It's like, it's like anything, like writing a book, and it's like, I could write a sequel to to this series that is guaranteed to make money, but if I don't feel the muse to write something in this, I feel the muse to write a new thing, do something else, then okay, there it is. Whereas Hollywood, it's money. So Cabin in the Woods did not do incredibly well financially. I think it did well critically, but financially, $30 million budget, box office $66 million, and as I've talked about, that's not really profitable. So yeah, that's probably, part of why we've never seen a sequel. The other reason, I guess, spoilers if you've never seen Cabin in the Woods, but if you've never seen Cabin in the Woods, I don't know what you're doing listening to my voice. But at the end of the movie, basically the world ends. So a sequel is kind of out of the books. A prequel could be interesting, because Cabin in the Woods was not a movie that really relied on mystery. There are mysteries, I guess, involved in it, but we got a lot of answers, and really they were not trying to hide things from you. Like, right at the start, you basically get to see, the facility where all this is run, and throughout the whole movie, you kind of just get glimpses of behind the scenes. You get to peel back the curtain the whole time. You don't really feel that same connection with the characters. It's like, the characters don't know what's going on, and I don't know what's going on either. It's like, you kind of know what's going on. That's part of the appeal. It's kind of a different type of movie. So a prequel could work just to see, you could look at how this got started, but, I would imagine this got started a long time ago. Like, I feel if you did, like, how this got started for Cabin in the Woods, it'd be like a period piece in the 1500s or something like that. So I don't know what they could really do. But yeah, I love Cabin in the Woods, so I'd like to see any more of that. But I understand, perhaps more than Cloverfield, why they would not want to revisit Cabin in the Woods. It is kind of self-contained. Speaking of more sequels, I know there's just a lot of sequel talk. There's a lot of sequel talk going on. Pacific Rim 2. I've talked about this a little bit. But now we find out the Pacific Rim 2 has been delayed indefinitely. Which is not what you want to hear. Because that could mean never. That could mean this movie will never get made. So again, this comes down to a financial issue, as everything else does. The Pacific Rim didn't do incredibly well. It was about $180 or $190 million budget, and it made $411 million worldwide. However, most of that was in China, I believe. $101 million domestically, $309 million foreign. Okay, so that's like $75 million profit foreign, $50 million. That's like $125 million. That's not good. That's not good enough. So yeah, so that's why it's not been made. If the numbers were a lot better, we would have gotten Pacific Rim 2. We would already have it. We would already be seeing it right now. That's kind of how it is. But then there's apparently some other issues involving, Legendary and Warner Brothers and Universal and sort of this kind of studio conflicts and things like that. But I think mostly it comes down to money. So yeah, it's been put on halt indefinitely. Guillermo says, however, there's still perhaps some hope. We are still turning in a screenplay and a budget in 3 weeks. As far as I'm concerned, it's not gone. We're still on it. Now, Guillermo has kind of a reputation for being very optimistic. He's kind of like the Peter Molyneux of movies, except he actually puts out good stuff. So it's a little bit different, but he is very optimistic about things. He tends to be. So I can't really take his word as much. I think it always comes down to budget issues. So we'll see. Pacific Rim 2, it does have a scheduled release date of August 4th, 2017, but at this point, I wouldn't hold out hope to be seeing it on that day. I would, of course, love to see Pacific Rim 2, but I'd also like to see Guillermo do other projects, most notably At the Mountains of Madness. That's, I think, his dream project, and it's my dream movie to see from him, so I mean, I would be okay if he's like, all right, Pacific Rim 2, we'll have to wait. I'm going to have to do At the Mountains of Madness. I don't think that would be the worst article for me to read. But, yeah, we'll see where it goes. All right, so finally then the weird news of the day is about Mary Poppins. You already know what I'm going to say, I assume. Mary Poppins is not getting a remake. I know, maybe that's what you thought. Maybe that is what you thought. You thought it was going to be remade because everything else gets remade nowadays. Mary Poppins makes... Well, I mean, it doesn't make sense, but it kind of makes sense. But no, it's not getting remade. It's getting a sequel. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Here's what, based on recent years, here's exactly what I've expected from this article. I would expect they're making a reimagining of the Mary Poppins film from 1964, and it's called Poppins. That's what I expected. Absolutely what I expected. But it's not. It's not. They're making a sequel set 20 years after the events of the original film. And I guess it's called Mary Poppins 2. I don't know if that's confirmed. I don't know if that's confirmed, but I don't know what else they would call it. Like, I don't think you're allowed to just call it Mary Poppins. That just seems wrong to me. But if you call it Mary Poppins 2, that just seems like... That's like Lion King 2 or something. Like, that's just like, ugh. Like, it just puts a bad taste in people's mouth. Like, that's why I thought Poppins would just be... I mean, it's not like... People know what it is. Not else is Poppins. You know, what else is Poppins but Mary? So, yes, the sequel, 20 years after the events of the original. I just don't get this. I mean... There were a number of Mary Poppins books. There was like 8 of them. And, I mean, they were all about, you know, the same family. Or the same kids at the very least. But I don't, like, why set it 20 years after the original? Like, what does that do? What does that accomplish? The kids are going to be grown up? Or is it just going to be different kids? They're just going to kind of... But then... I mean, that's kind of all weird, but then you go back to the just original base problem of that they're redoing or, you know, going back to Mary Poppins, which is just kind of like Mary Poppins didn't even have a sequel, like, back in the day when it was like the bee's knees. But now it's like, well, you don't have Julie Andrews, you don't have Dick Van Dyke. They're part of what made Mary Poppins so damn awesome. Like, for the record, Mary Poppins, when it came out, got 13 Academy Award nominations and won 5 of them. And yet it never got a sequel. Until now. I don't know. I just don't know. It's gonna be a musical, of course. Because they have director Rob Marshall involved, who directed Chicago and Into the Woods, and what else has he done? Oh, he did Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. Great! Anyways. Yeah, it's just dumb. It's just dumb. If they had said a remake or a reimagining of the original film, this still would have been my crazy news of the day, but I don't think I would have been as shocked as a sequel set 20 years after the, like the original. It's like 1910 to 1930. Like, what's the difference? Why is that important? Why do you need... You're going to have the kids as adults, or you're going to have a different family. But if you have a different family, why set it 20 years? What's the... I don't get it. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the original Mary Poppins movie. I wrote a whole essay in college about it, and it was just, yeah, I like the original Mary Poppins a lot. So this kind of just pisses me off, but I'm not shocked that it's being, that they're going back to it. But going back to it in this way, I don't get it. I just don't get it. All right, so Mangg's movie recommendation of the week. Since I'm trying to touch on different genres, it's a martial arts movie this week, which some of you, I'm sure, are not really interested in. But if you were to try to get interested in it, this is the one that I'm going to recommend to you, and that is Fist of Legend, which is a 1994 Hong Kong martial arts movie starring Jet Li. And I think if you ask anybody that's probably serious about martial arts movies, this is probably at the top of their list, or near it at the very least. It pretty much has everything you want in a martial arts movie. Now, keep in mind, this is not like Crouching Tiger or any bullshit like that. This is the real deal. This is some real shit going down. The story is, I mean, potentially a little cliche nowadays, I guess. It is a remake, somewhat, of Bruce Lee's Fist of Fury from back in the 70s, so, these are kind of tropes that have been touched upon, but it's about a guy played by Jet Li who's kind of caught up in this mix of, Chinese versus, Japan and, occupations and things like that, and he kind of gets involved with this general from the Imperial Japanese Army, and it's just like the ending fight scene is some of the craziest shit I've ever seen, and it's just really a fantastic movie. Currently holds a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, if you're curious. So if you like martial arts movie and you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend it. If you are not into martial arts movie, or if you're curious or something like that, you could do worse than seeing Fist of Legend. So that's my movie recommendation of the week. All right, so finally, the last thing I want to talk about is that I saw the movie The Visit this week, M. Night Shyamalan's new movie. And I originally was not going to do this as kind of a spoilery review, but I decided I kind of have to say everything that I need to say. So if you're worried about spoilers, then I guess this is where we leave you. If you're curious on how it is because you want to go see it, I guess I can recommend it. It wasn't bad. It's not the best Shyamalan movie, but it's far from his worst movie. And yeah, it's somewhat entertaining. But moving on to my more in-depth review. Let me first say that I used to really enjoy the concept or the experience of seeing a movie in a theater, surrounded by other people. Like, I used to really just enjoy it just because, like, it was like part of seeing a movie, Like, you could watch movies at home by yourself or something like that, but being in a dark theater just surrounded by all these other people that are there for the same purpose as you, and they're all just kind of, you're wrapped up in this shared experience. Like, that was something kind of unique, and it could only really happen at the theater, and I enjoyed it. You got to see when people laughed, or when people jumped, or when people, made remarks and things like that, and it was just kind of like, we're all here for the same reason. Nowadays, though, I really hate it. Nowadays, I realize that I was kind of dumb because people are really obnoxious. Now, of course, I'm saying this just because of my experience seeing The Visit, but it's not unique to me seeing The Visit. I've kind of had this feeling growing over the last couple of years or so. But yeah, people are just kind of like, I guess horror movies especially, that's really where it brings out the worst in people. But I felt like at the Visit, people were just there for, like, people were there just for the cheap thrills, and it was just kind of like, I'm going to just say whatever comes to my mind, because this is a movie theater, and you can do that. And it's just like, nope, no, it's not. No, you're not. Stop it. And I realize that this is probably going to be the most hipsterish, pretentious thing I'll ever say. But when I see a horror movie, like, I get my enjoyment out of it by kind of, like, deconstructing it or dissecting it, you know, really trying to understand the art of a horror movie, you know. And I realize how this sounds. Like, God damn it, Mangg, it's just freaking horror movie. People die, it's funny, and it's just so stupid. Like, yeah, I know, I get it. A horror movie is just the lowest stock of film. Well, except for comedies. But no, it's kind of like how I feel about trailers. You know, I don't like trailers because they inform me about upcoming movies. I like trailers because of you know, they're an art form. And, you know, a lot of things can be art forms, and so people don't usually think of trailers in that way. But I do. I like how they are put together. I think it's its own kind of form. I think the same way of horror movies. You know, I don't watch horror movies because I want to be scared or because I want to be shocked or startled. I go see horror movies because they're an art form. You know, they're the way they're put together, the way they're shot, the way they're written, the stories that they tell, you know, it all kind of comes together. Now, there are good ones and there are bad ones, just like there are good trailers and bad trailers. But I kind of, when I'm watching a horror movie, I don't ever jump. I don't ever laugh. I don't ever kind of, you know, remark on anything. I just kind of sit there and, you know, a lot of thoughts are going through my head when I'm watching, but I'm very quiet. Maybe occasionally I'll grin. And, you know, if it's kind of like a horror with comedic elements, I'll grin because something might be, you know, meant to be funny. But usually if I grin during a horror movie, it's because like, if you see me grin during a horror movie, it's probably because in my head I'm thinking, damn, that was clever. That's probably exactly what is going through my head. And so, anyways, I mentioned this because while other people watching The Visit were thinking, you know, I don't know what they were thinking. I can't enter the mindset, but they were there for their cheap thrills. I was thinking a couple of questions, and so I will pose them to you. They are: one, should a movie be experienced in a vacuum? By which I mean, should you view a movie and potentially critique it in the mindset that no other movies exist? As in, you know, should this movie be viewed or experienced as completely standalone, and other movies of the same genre or same style or, you know, in general don't exist and don't influence your thoughts? And then the second question is, can a movie be experienced in a vacuum? And so this is kind of what I was thinking about while I was watching the movie, because it's, you know, The Visit is a found footage horror movie. And there are a bunch of those. There are a whole bunch of those. And so I was thinking about, while I was watching it, I was like, okay, is this a good found footage horror movie? And so by posing that question to myself, I was automatically comparing it to other found footage horror movies. And so then I pose it to the question to myself is, you know, should I be comparing it to other found footage horror movies or other horror movies in general, or should I just be treating it as a standalone cinematic experience? You know, should I be treating it on its own merit? And so then that brought me to the second question of, can I even do that? There are some very good found footage horror movies, such as, REC, which is my favorite horror movie of all time. And so it's very easy for me to compare any found footage or any horror movie to REC. But then there are also very bad found footage horror movies, such as, gosh, what is the name of that movie? Well, there are a bunch. Jesus. I'm really trying to think of it. Diary of the Dead. That's it. Diary of the Dead is the one I was thinking of. Which is it's a found footage zombie movie from George A. Romero, which is pretty garbage. In my opinion, it was not very good. But there are a whole bunch of other found footage horror movies that are not very good, because, it's very easy to not make a very good found footage horror movie. And so, I was thinking about, okay, how does this compare to REC? How does this compare to so many other movies that I've seen, in this genre, the Tunnel, or The Bay, or Diary of the Dead, or The Gallows, which I just saw recently. All sorts of these found footage. It's a very common, subgenre nowadays. And so I came to the conclusion at the end of the night that I don't think it is possible to review a movie on its own, like in a vacuum, on its own merits, because like no movie or no media really of any kind, book, movie, video game, whatever, is created in a vacuum. Like anybody that sets out to make a movie, they're going to draw inevitably, consciously or subconsciously, from all their experiences of everything else that they've seen. That's just how it is. And so that's how it is as a viewer. Like, no matter, even if you want to, even if you try your hardest to view this as just a standalone thing, without bringing anything else into it, you get kind of metaphysical with it almost, where it's like you are, a creation of your own experiences. I'm sorry, this is getting very meta, but this is what was going through my head, which you may take as a criticism of the movie, because this is what I was thinking about, but that's just how my brain works, so don't read into it. It's just kind of inevitable, is you can't fight it. And so, if you've ever had somebody tell you, like, oh, you should watch this, but don't compare it to blah, 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 just, watch it on its own thing. The most recent example for me was True Detective Season 2. I was told by somebody, like, oh, don't compare it to True Detective Season 1. Just, treat it as its own thing. And it's like, even if I wanted to do that, that's impossible. Like, that is literally, you'll never treat it as its own thing. Even if you're sitting there like, all right, I'm going to treat this, I'm going to treat it as its own thing, and I'm going to review it, and it's just going to be, it's just, boom, here we go. Not going to compare it. You're comparing it. It's in your freaking subconscious. Your thoughts are affected by every other thing you've experienced. That's just how it is. So that's what I was thinking about when I was seeing The Visit, if you're curious. So what about the actual movie itself? Well, let me just read one line. I'm going to paraphrase one line from the Wikipedia plot description, because it's probably the funniest line from a plot description I've ever seen, from a plot synopsis, ever. Rebecca and Tyler attempt to leave the house, but the grandparents trap them and force them to play Yahtzee. And that would be a horror night for me. It's like, no, you're not going anywhere. You're playing Yahtzee. Ah! Yeah, so there's a section in the movie where they're forced to have kind of a game night with the grandparents. And so I was like, oh man, they're going to play Twilight Imperium 3. Those kids are never getting to bed. But no, it ended up being Yahtzee, just so much worse. See, now if they had put Cosmic Encounter in there, it wouldn't be a horror movie anymore. I guess Yahtzee's better than Sorry. Anyways, alright. So, before I get into the kind of plot of the movie and the specifics, I want to talk about the tone of the movie. If you go to the Wikipedia page for The Visit, and you might have already done that, or you might never do it, doesn't matter because I'm going to tell you. It calls it a 2015 American comedy horror film. Yes, it is billed as a comedy horror film, which I don't think the trailers really represent. And so the tone of the movie is probably the most interesting thing. And so there's another kind of quote here from the Wikipedia page that I'm going to read, because that's what I like. That's what this Manggcast is I like to read Wikipedia pages. Shyamalan admitted that he had trouble getting the tone for the film locked down during the editing film. Telling Bloody Disgusting that the first cut of the film resembled an art house film more so than a horror film. A second cut of the film went in the opposite direction and the film became a comedy. Shyamalan eventually struck a middle balance and cut the film as a thriller, which according to him helped tie the different elements together as they could stay in service of the movie. And so I read that and I'm like, that's really freaking interesting how powerful editing can be for a movie. Like, before it goes into the editing bay, you literally just have like a pile of just footage. You just have people in front of a camera just delivering lines and doing things. It isn't until it goes through editing that it actually becomes a specific movie. And so, because of editing, he could have had 3 very different films. Like, you use, a lot of the same footage, but just how it's put together in specific orders and with, music and, all sorts of things like that, you create a whole context and tone for the entire, piece. So I thought that was really interesting. And the tone of the movie is again, very interesting. Because it could have very easily been just a straight horror movie. But due to editing, it became a comedy horror. And so I think that's a very misunderstood genre. Because a lot of people, I think, would say that it just doesn't work. Comedy horror just can't exist because it's like a paradox. And I think that's not true, because as long as Evil Dead 2 exists, a comedy horror movie can work. But I think there's almost two kinds of comedy horrors. There are comedies that use horror elements. And this would be your scary movies. Or your Shaun of the Deads. Things like that. Things where it's very ostentatiously a comedy. But it uses elements frequently, viewed from, a horror lens. So Shaun of the Dead uses zombies in the concept of a zombie apocalypse. But it's not a scary movie. It's a comedic movie. It may have elements that scare you. Especially, I guess, if you're easily frightened or if you're younger, it can be more so. Like, when I saw Scary Movie, I was 10. I was 10 years old when I saw Scary Movie. It frightened me. I had never seen Scream, or really, I had never seen almost any horror movies. I was 10 years old. And there was, like, a dick going in a guy's ear, and I was traumatized. I'll tell you that. I'm not afraid to admit it. So, they can frighten, but that is not really their intent. And again, I think editing plays a lot into that. I think, some of these comedies that have horror elements could be edited to perhaps be a bit more scary or to remove the horror entirely. They don't really try to strike a balance. They are comedies. That's what they are. This is not my preferred subgenre of anything. I mean, I love Shaun of the Dead, but that's a very rare example. The other subgenre is then your Evil Dead 2, things like that. Movies that try to strike a balance. Like, I want to say they are horror movies that use comedic elements. But that's very difficult. Like, and I think this subgenre is very, very rare for it to work well. Because one element takes you out of the other, You can't, like, you either, like, ping-ponging back and forth between, oh, God, that's scary, and, oh, man, I'm laughing my ass off, and it just doesn't, it's like this discord, But I think they try to strike a balance between that, where you have what seems to be a horror movie, and yet you can't help but it's I guess if I had to put like a name for it, it'd almost be like laughing at a funeral, where it's like, this is fucked up, and yet I have to laugh because of how fucked up it is. Like, it's kind of like that. I think Evil Dead 2 had a lot of that, where it's just like, Jesus, this is horrific, but damn it if it's not funny. It's kind of like that. Where when you watch a comedy horror in, you know, the other subgenre, you watch something like Shaun of the Dead, you're not really ever like, wow, that's really effed up. Because it's meant to be a comedy. Or something like Zombieland. There are elements, I guess, in Zombieland specifically where it's like, wow, that's effed up, but it's funny. But yeah, the other subgenre, I think, is more, you know, laughing at a funeral kind of thing. Which is, again, it's a very difficult subgenre to pull off. It's very tough. Does The Visit succeed? It's hard to say. I mean, I never laughed out loud. I don't think I laughed out loud during The Visit, but I don't laugh out loud almost at anything, so don't judge me. But I will say that this was probably the most laughter I've ever heard at a horror movie in a long time. And I guess it's easy to just say it. Oh yeah, it was intentional. You know, it's like, oh yeah, it was meant to be funny. Whereas you watch a lot of horror movies, especially, you know, the worst horror movies easily, where it's just like, you know, people are laughing at things that are not meant to be funny. It's like, this is not a comedy horror. It's like, well, that's what you made. I think this was definitely more in the kind of laughing at a funeral camp. They're in kind of a horrific situation. And you can't help but laugh at the situation that they're in. And I think with a lot of the laughing at a funeral type movies, if you were in the situation, you would not find it funny. You would not ever laugh at any of this shit. You'd be scared. And I think that's kind of a big difference. If I was in the situation in Shaun of the Dead, I think I would laugh at some of the shit that happens. Because it's just funny. I think that's a big difference. Okay. Let's finally get into it then, I guess. So The Visit is about two kids. One's 15, one's 12, I believe. And the 15-year-old is very much kind of the auteur filmmaker who thinks she's a genius and is trying to make, you know, very... I think she was probably a lot of the basis for kind of the art house direction. She seems very much that type of filmmaker where everything is kind of artsy and it has to be perfect and blah, blah, blah. I didn't actually find her that annoying because I was like, I'm probably a lot like this. This is probably what people think of me. The younger kid, 12-year-old boy, he was probably the largest part of the comedic elements, I think. Like, the straight comedic elements. Because he was a wannabe freestyle rapper. Yeah. I mean, that probably tells you a lot of what you need to know. And I think he was very much on the border between endearing and obnoxious. For me, probably a bit too close to obnoxious, because I didn't think his rapping was that good. Which, I mean, is kind of harsh to say. I guess for a 12-year-old, you could do a lot worse. But he also used like a lot of slang. Like, yeah, he used a lot of slang terms, which even I had to like look up. I was like, what the hell does that mean? But it's like, oh, apparently people use that. So I guess it was somewhat well researched. I think he used the term like throwing shade or something like that, and I'm like, what is that? So yeah, they're the two kids are the main characters, which again is kind of a challenge for filmmaking, is having a couple kids be the main stars of your movie. And so the plot is that they live with their single mom, and their single mom has not spoken to her parents in 15 years. But suddenly her parents kind of track her down via the internet and find out she has grandkids, and they want to meet them. So the kids want to meet the grandparents. I don't know why, but they do. And so the mother agrees to send the kids up to their farmhouse for a week. Yeah, this sounds absolutely ridiculous, but here we are. And so they go up to the farmhouse and they film the entire thing. It's found footage because this girl wants to be a filmmaker, so she's making a documentary of the whole thing. And so it starts out relatively normal. The grandparents seem really sweet and nice. And then, of course, things kind of get stranger as time goes on. And they kind of like poke their heads out even though they're not supposed to past 9:30 p.m. And they see, some weird shit going on and blah, blah, blah. And okay, so a few things that I want to mention then. I know this podcast is running long, but I want to mention this stuff. First thing, I was very impressed on Shyamalan's choice to not have a Paranormal Activity type static cam set up overnight. I think that was a very easy route for him to go through with just, the kids are like, let's set up a camera in the living room and we'll just leave it on overnight and we'll check it. And then, look at all this weird stuff that happened. Oh my God. He actually didn't go that route. And like the young boy was like, we should set up a camera. And, the older girl was like, no, that's wrong. We're not doing that. So they actually avoided doing that for most of the movie. They did finally set it up, because why would you not? Even I would do it in that situation. So they do finally set it up. And yeah, it is kind of Paranormal Activity-esque, just because, Paranormal Activity set kind of standard for that. But I was impressed that he held off that long, and he only did it once. It was only a one-time thing. Alright, so then the other stuff, because I'm sure you all are dying to know, if you plan on never seeing the movie or you've already seen it, this is where there's no returning from here, because I'm going to reveal to you the twist, because of course there's a twist. It's a Shyamalan movie, there has to be a twist, although I don't think, no, not all of his movies have twists, but it's a horror movie, it's got a twist. And so the twist is probably the only, like, creepy part of the whole movie for me. Because I don't get scared, but I judge a creepiness of a movie by how, like, where, like, my hair starts to stand up a little bit, and I can kind of feel it. I'm like, oh, that's creepy. So this was the only part where I was like, oh, that's kind of creepy. And so the reveal was that they occasionally Skyped with their mom throughout the trip. And the mom, like, never wanted to be seen by the grandparents because she didn't want to talk to them. She didn't want anything to do with them because there was trouble. And so finally, the kids are eventually like, they're acting really weird, and we don't like this. And so eventually the grandparents are like outside talking, and the kids are like, here, Mom, look, they're out there like yelling and stuff. And so they bring up the laptop to the window, and they show the grandparents to the mother. And the mother's like, wait, those aren't your grandparents. Have you been staying with them all week? And it's like, oh, shit, because surprisingly, I didn't see it coming. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. But it was actually pretty creepy when this kind of ball dropped, because it's like, oh, shit, man. What happened to the real parents? What's going on? Oh, my God. It was kind of like, whoa. So that was the main twist of the movie. However, there was a second twist. And this twist was not mentioned. This was not on display or anything like that. This was a much more subtle, like, meta twist. I don't know if this was even his intention, but I think it might have been. Throughout this whole movie, and from the trailers and kind of all that, and that kind of brings in a separate discussion of should a trailer affect your viewing of a movie. And again, I argue that if it can't help but affect your viewing of a movie, because if you've just seen the trailer, you probably believe that there's some supernatural shit going on. And throughout the whole movie, this is very much reinforced. Perhaps, like, almost subconsciously, but I do believe that it is kind of reinforced throughout the movie that you believe something supernatural is going on. And my thought, and I think a lot of other people's thoughts, was that the grandparents were like werewolves. Because they weren't, you weren't supposed to come out overnight, and you see, like, her, she shed all her clothes and she's like scratching at a door, and you see at one point they play hide and seek and she's like crawling after them, and she's doing it like, like a wolf would or something like that. I think you're led to believe that they're werewolves. And I think there may also be like a Red Riding Hood kind of like switcheroo kind of thing going on in your head. And so that's what I honestly, I think you're led to believe that they're werewolves. And you find out And again, this is not like a ball drop moment. This is just kind of, I want to say revealed, but that sounds more like impactful than I guess it is. It's just kind of like slowly shown that they are not, there's nothing supernatural going on. They're just insane people. They broke out of an insane asylum. They killed the grandparents and they hid the bodies, and they've just been living here. And I guess they had talked with the people, because the original grandparents were like volunteers at the insane asylum. So I guess they had mentioned that they had grandkids coming to visit. And so, yeah, so these insane people just murdered them and lived here and impersonated the grandparents. There's nothing supernatural going on. Not at all. Not 1%. It is all just they're insane. And this is what's going on. And so I think stepping out of the movie, I'm not sure you even realized that your mind had kind of been subverted like that, where you no longer think that it's supernatural. You know what's going on. But I guess you almost kind of forget that what you thought was supernatural is not. Like, it was kind of just stolen out from under you, you know, like, nope, not supernatural. You don't even realize it because you're just thinking about other things from the movie. So it's that very interesting kind of a meta thing that I thought about immediately when I stepped out. It was like, wow, that was like a second twist. I think the village kind of had a similar aspect, because the twist in that movie, again, spoiler, I'm sorry, the twist in that movie was that it wasn't like set in the 1500s. It was present day. That was the big twist. But the other subtle twist was that, like, and I guess that was less subtle because that it had relation to do with kind of the creatures, and they weren't real, so that was not as subtle. But that was another kind of where you thought it was supernatural, but it's not. But I think The Visit did it much more subtly, and I was much more impressed with that. So yeah, overall, it was kind of like it was decent. I would give it like a 7 out of 10. Or if I had to do a much more binary scale, I would probably just give it like a thumbs up, which maybe I should do instead of numbers. I'll just give it a thumbs up. I liked it. I'd probably watch it again because I did kind of like the meta aspect to it, and yeah, I thought it was well put together for the most part. The tone was a little strange. I didn't think it was that comedic, but again, I'm kind of an unfunny bastard. Alright, so I've talked way too long about all sorts of stuff. I've gotten way too meta. I'm sorry for droning on and on, but if you stuck through the whole thing, I appreciate it. Yeah. You know, I try to sound more intelligent than I am. Just like most people. So, my name is Mangg. This has been the Manggcast for September 19th, 2015, and I will see you fine folks next week.